So, friends, welcome. We're glad you're here, and thanks for being a part of our program this evening. It's here we are again. It's amazing to me that there's enough to talk about week after week after week, and yet how valuable and important it is to have so many of you coming in. My name is Stephen Fetter. I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office. And Eric and I were just saying what a privilege it is to be able to connect with you all this way and to have such a strong staff team that makes the two of us, or the three of us with Clyde, look like we know what we're doing. It's great and a privilege, and a reminder again of how important the work is that you're doing to allow us to be the church from coast to coast to coast, to have the financial resources that we need to allow us to live out God's mission and to be the people in this country who can do what God wants us to do. If you folks weren't doing your job, we would be much more anxious about how to keep our doors open. And this way you free us up to actually do the mission that God calls us to do. Thank you for that. Thank you to Eric and Clyde for the work that you're doing to help us stay focused and solvent and missional in our thinking. Let me turn things over to Eric and look forward to this week's installment. Over to you, Eric.
Great. Thanks, folks. As is our custom, perhaps we could take just a moment to, part of being church is also to acknowledge the land. And I'll call out where I am. You're free to type in what part of the country and what your acknowledgement might be. But we're broadcasting from the land here in Toronto. In downtown Toronto, we're meeting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So with that, we'll dive into the program. There's a few new announcements, but mainly we're seeing the money starting to flow. So we start with the new creed, and Steve will know by now that we enter it twice. I really want to talk about this being called to be the church. As you're going to hear me say a couple of times, none of us as church volunteers and church staff, in my case, and Steve and Aaron's, signed on for what's been going on the last 10 weeks in terms of trying to help the whole system adapt. And yet we've rallied behind each other, we're supporting each other, and I think that's what being church, being called to be the church means right now for many of us. So next slide. Oh, and I guess just to get this over with, a lot of people concerned about what I might be wearing. So my wife says this is an appropriate shirt. The Real Jerk is one of my favorite restaurants in Toronto, specializing in Jamaican jerk cuisine. And I thought Toronto deserved a shout out as well. So with that, what we're going to cover tonight is, again, whatever's newsworthy. And let's face it, the Prime Minister's announcing something every single day. We have one more chance for folks to sign on to have the 10% processing done for them. That needs to happen this week. This is to have the General Counsel Office and ADP do those transactions and track it, and basically report back to you at the end when the credit has been maximized. We've got pretty fulsome information now on the 10% processing, the 75% processing, and we're also starting to understand a little bit more of the various exceptions that we're bumping into in the unique circumstances across the country. So that's basically what we're going to look to cover tonight. And next week, we're thinking we're going to have more of a pure Q&A session, which with as large a group as we've been having, could be a real interesting effort. In any case, the disclaimer, information is accurate as of 3 p.m. today and may be affected by subsequent announcements. Next slide, please. So the latest news, we're still not eligible. When I say we, I'm speaking for churches, but this tends to be cover our outreach ministries and so on as well. Churches are still not eligible for either the rent program or the $40,000 loan program. But we're also hearing rumblings on each of those. So, stay tuned. As I mentioned, the deadline is this Friday for congregations who want to sign up for the processing. There was a broadcast to all pastoral charges on Monday. And we did that on purpose, apologizing for the duplication and so on, but just wanting to make sure that that gets out to as many people as possible. It was sent to the treasurer's list, but the request has to come from the authorized ADP contact. The Prime Minister announced this week, I think it was this week, might have been Friday, that the 75% subsidy program is going to be extended. No details yet, but if I was guessing, I would think that they would roll it out for some number of 4-week chunks, either one chunk or 2 chunks, whatever they're going to do, but that would seem to be the logical explanation. I also want to flag, I've mentioned this in a couple of earlier webinars, but the bad news is hitting in the sense that those of you out there with June insurance policy renewals are looking at 30% increases. And believe it or not, that's consistent with what's happening to all churches, across the country, more than that actually. And we, I never thought I'd say we fought to limit an increase to 30%, but there it is. A couple of things, the T3010 filing deadline, just a reminder that it is extended to December 31st. And Paul Norris, I think up in Cooksville, reports that the new online filing system really works really, really well and recommends it to folks. He's shared a few things he learned along the way. And at some point, we'll talk about normal stuff like that again. Also a reminder to submit your blue form church statistics if you haven't already. Folks are understandably behind with that. But Susan Jackson asks that you deal with that as soon as you can. Okay, next slide, please.
Let me just add to that. I've had a couple of complaints about treasurers who said, I didn't get the email, why not? And it's because the treasurer changed in your church, and your church hasn't submitted the blue form yet, so we didn't update the treasurer's list. So you are one of the things on our blue forms and one of the reasons why we need to get those in.
Absolutely. And we are looking into things like, we had a couple of cases we've identified where people did everything they were asked at the very beginning, way back in early April, and didn't make the first list. So all I can say is check with us, check with payroll at the church, and we'll see if we processed. I see Gordon Waldy asking a question there. We'll see if you're on the list or if something got processed. Please understand that things are moving really fast, and this whole thing is a special deal. It's not something ADP is offering to its customers at all, and even their customer service reps haven't necessarily been fully briefed because we're moving with the corporate people.
Sure.
So
before we go on to this slide, several questions on YouTube about why are those insurance rates going up? 30% seems really hard.
Oh, it's outrageous. I think it's appalling. But that being said, we took it out to every one of the insurance companies that specializes or offers coverage in this space. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I think they're really nervous about the age of our buildings. There have been, it only takes 1 or 2 large arson type claims, and they're nervous about that, even though the United Church experience in the last few years has been pretty good that way. But all I can tell you is it's the best deal we could get for the UCC Protect people. Those with other insurers that I talked to already have seen increases bigger than that. And the industry as in general is really, really freaked out, not just about pandemic insurance related claims, but about climate change. And this is not an area where we're likely to see insurance premiums moderating. I'm hoping we can contain it at this level of increase for a time.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Just the mea culpas. I actually had well, I shouldn't say actually, I've done lots of errors during this 8-week run. But there was an error in one of the example spreadsheets that I had for you, or examples last week. I'll show you what it was. It basically had to do with the fact that you can claim the 10% rebate for any number of employees. There's no limit, but there is still a limit of 10% of payroll. Another thing I want to flag is I am not going to give you absolute direction on interpreting your revenue streams and year over year and what can be included or not. And that's because the income tax people in the Department of Finance aren't either. There still aren't firmly documented definitions for revenue. We're on a call with the CRA tomorrow and we'll be asking again. But there's a fuzziness to things like defining extraordinary income. So those are the mea culpas this week. I'll talk a little bit about the 10% calculation as well. Next slide, please. So, and before I start though, I want to say a huge thank you. None of us, anyone who's on this call, none of us signed on for, if you're a treasurer or a payroll administrator, the extra work or trying to figure this out. And nobody can give us straight answers, and we get different answers wherever we call, certainly from me. And through all of this, I just say that the General Counsel payroll team has been dealing with unprecedented volumes. They're stepping in to set up this support where they can help you and be an authorized assistant. They're doing all kinds of things. So Angelica, Eileen, Olga, and Ravi, thank you for that. And I never thought I'd be thanking ADP in a hugely public way, but here it is. Kathy Locke and the team have been really, really responsive, and they understand the relatively unique payroll structure of the United Church, where we have literally a couple of thousand very small employers. So let's move on to the next slide, and I'm reading the chat box as we go, and I'll get to John from Bella Coola. If you're on the list, John, I'll have a look for you on the actual printout. There should be payments arriving in the next, they should be there either today or latest tomorrow is what we're told. So the bank loan, we're still not eligible. Most camps are. And if there are outreach agencies that are incorporated and have a sales type revenue stream, they'll be eligible as well. But we'll do, for now, I'm sick of talking about that one, other than to say there's some very high level lobbying continuing, and who knows, that this is one where the government might become more flexible, but so far, no. Next slide. Similarly, the rent program. I actually thought we'd have some news. I've been hearing these assurances for the last 4 or 5 days, but nothing announced yet. Today's announcements was around students going back to school and again, more safeguards and protections for frontline workers, but stay tuned. Next slide. There we go. So again, the response benefit, I'm listing them here for any situations where we might have some new folks. But the message here is that this program has been liberalized to accommodate situations where people have a bit of income left or where they might have multiple arrangements. The many part-time and contract workers structure the way we often do it in Churchland. It might be, they might well be better off for this 16-week period where there's a payout of $500 a week. Next slide, please. Where we do that, a couple of cautions. First, check with your region around province-specific considerations. We do hope that if you're eligible for the 75%, that you might not have to do too many draconian type layoffs. But just to say that for folks who are in the benefit plan, benefits would be continued for short-term layoff situations, excluding the restorative care program and LTD, which obviously are absence-based. Arrangements can also be made to keep up pension contributions. And through all of this, we've talked in past weeks, and we have a webinar online about trying to do the record of employment online as opposed to the current paper methodology that is still the standard. Next slide, please. So by now I know many of you have been trying to do this, but I just summarizing the different ways of trying to set up electronic access to both the CRA and Service Canada. Clyde is our resident expert on that. He's done a webinar over on United Learning on this subject for the representative side. I've heard quite a number of people having success with the my business account. The main hurdle you need to get past, and as Clyde has mentioned for the last few weeks, is as part of the verification process, whoever it is that's applying online is going to be asked for their social insurance number and and they should also have their tax filings with them, because that's a very key security question for the CRA to validate that they're actually dealing with someone who is likely authorized and willing to and having access to that information. So moving right along, I want to dive into the actual.
Yeah, before we move along, Eric, a question that came up a couple of minutes ago, and I've been saving for this slide. A couple of people are saying, I signed up for a represent a client. I did it a long time ago. I still haven't heard anything. How long does this take? The one question I'm looking at says, I submitted my documents on the 23rd of April. How long should we be expecting this?
I'm going to flip that over to my guru.
I would have thought that you would have had some information by now under normal circumstances. I can't understand it or explain it unless there was something in the filing that wasn't correct as far as what the CRA was looking at. And it might be worth a phone call, but be prepared for a long wait on the phone. However, I was told that Thursday mornings are usually the quietest time for trying to get through to the CRA. So tomorrow morning might be a good opportunity for you.
Sounds like the timing is excellent. Oh, and here's somebody who said, I spoke to a senior CRA agent yesterday about being authorized to represent a client, and they told me it would take two weeks to 30 days with their backlog. So that's somebody in the Zoom room who's written that to the chat just as you were talking.
That's the kind of stuff. It changes all the time. And frankly, sometimes you can get right through on a call, and sometimes you're in a queue for 2 hours. So that's not very helpful when you're a volunteer treasurer with X amount of time to give to this.
Yeah. No, but that's the world we're living in. So thank you. There's other questions coming in about the 10%, but I know you're going to be talking further about that.
I'll be speaking to that at length, but the short answer is we took an extra couple of days to double check and triple check the calculations and sign off. And they were put into the banking system on Monday, and I'm told that they should be in most people's accounts today or latest tomorrow for the mainstream banks. Could be another day for credit unions, which are a little more paper-based.
Perfect.
Okay, so
just so that
panicking that we haven't had them yet.
Yeah, just so that everybody knows, I got no special treatment. It's not in my own church account yet either.
There you go.
I think people were anxious that maybe they'd been missed, or if everybody else had got them and there's a screw up. So knowing that nobody's had them yet, but they should be out today or tomorrow, that's really a relief. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and folks, I know that some of you signed up for this, literally a month ago, but and maybe I should have clarified this or made this clearer in earlier sessions, but we have been waiting to get it done in batch, trying to have the most current information from the government and then done them all at once. So there's literally 17, this is a later slide, but there's about 600 payments from the March sector and well over 1,000 payments from April. And in some cases for you, that will be 2 payroll cycles, and for others, it'll just be 1. But basically that tap is now turned on, and it's set to get you your refunds from each pay until you max out on one of the criteria.
And if I'm remembering correctly, we will see that in our bank account as being a payment, a rebate from ADP. Is that correct?
That's
Or
correct.
does it come correct? So it
Yeah.
comes from the payroll service.
And you won't see it on any kind of ADP statement until the end. They don't, this is a completely new thing. They don't have the capacity to do that. They are going to report to every one of us at the end of the 10% rebate program to have a report that reconciles to the amounts you got and why.
Perfect. Thank you.
So just the last of the sort of, current situation recaps is the United Church $10,000 emergency loan program. It is intended to supplement and come afterwards, but there are special case situations where people might not be eligible for a program or whatever. We've already approved about a dozen of them. And by the way, approved they don't sit in a queue or anything. This happens really fast. The one thing that you could do if you're pursuing this that we haven't made as clear on the application, we're trying to send everybody their money electronically. So as soon as we approve your loan, and if we don't have your bank information for this purpose, Maria Pimpinello will actually be calling to try to get it from you so that we can issue the check electronically. There aren't many of us getting into the office, so even mailing from the office is more challenging at this time. And again, a big thanks to the United Church Foundation, which has provided the seed money for this. Moving on to the next slide. Again, this program is right now it's interest-free till September 30th, 2021. People have asked, does it matter when you apply for it and so on? All these facts are movable. The date that it's interest-free could be extended easily. I guarantee you it won't be shortened. That's all I can say. Similarly, the forgiveness amount, I wouldn't bet on that increasing. That's a very attractive forgiveness amount, but the timing of it might change depending on a whole bunch of factors that we can only begin to guess. So next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to get into the most current picture on how to do this stuff and the calculations, and we've been refining our story as we go. And please, I acknowledge that we learn stuff as we go. And I would say this webinar is the only one that is 100% current because of that. Next slide, please. So there's 2 programs. The easiest way to explain it from my perspective, these are the web links with really good information. It's about as comprehensible as government stuff has ever been, which is a low bar, but nonetheless, it's the 10%. When I say you take it, it literally means that you don't have to ask permission. You're doing a calculation and you're reaching into a bucket and you're taking it. And with the government's permission. The 75% program you have to apply for, and there's some of you are getting really caught up in the overlapping effective dates and so on. The government never rushed this stuff out. It's not like it all hangs together. So we're going to try to give you the most streamlined advice now that we can. Next slide. So all church payroll entities, okay, are eligible. It doesn't matter whether they're the charitable entity or not, are eligible for the 10% subsidy. Right now, based on the 1,100 that had responded in the first batch and the early response to our mailing this week, it looks like about 1,300 charges are going to have this done. Payments are arriving now. Again, they've been put into the bank system, which is pretty fast and reliable these days. I know you've been hearing this for a while, and I'm certainly getting a lot of follow-up queries based on what I said last week. We've slipped a couple of days. We purposely took some extra time to be really comfortable with the calculations because the General Counsel Office signed off. So we authorized everything on Friday. There was a batch processing over the weekend, and it went into the banking system on Monday. So I want to stress for folks, if you're going to sign up this week, if you're on this call, and frankly, it's the folks who haven't been on the webinars that are saying, what about me? Get it in this week in the prescribed format, and literally limit it to adding Eileen and using the wording and being very precise, because this instruction can't be coupled with other things. It needs to be related to contacts only. And obviously, all of this, what I'm saying right now, applies to folks, the employees on ADP. If you have folks not on ADP, I'll speak to that a little bit more. But we do have the tools online for you at the United Church website, at the payroll support website or web page, for those of you who need to do some of this yourselves.
There's a question here, Eric. Why are we getting the 10% back from ADP if it's really supposed to be a reduction in source deductions? What's the ADP role in this?
Well, it's one way or another, ADP has to process it, because Julia, the money is coming from the income tax withheld bucket. We are all charged with continuing to remit to the government all the employer and employee, EI and CPP and so on. But the government has basically decided that this is a bucket that doesn't need to involve them right now, that you could just reduce that amount. And that's basically the way the program has been designed, to allow quicker access. The idea that you can go and have a mechanism to take that money by remitting less of the income tax bucket. I hope that's clear. Okay, next slide, please. So I mentioned the United Church National web page that has all this stuff on it. Many of you have been there now. The first batch list of pastoral charges is listed there, and we're going to have a second batch list for folks who sign up now. And also on this same page, if you're doing it yourself, is the spreadsheet that you need to use to calculate it, that ADP has made available for you, for us, and the form that, well, if you're submitting it to ADP yourself, that's the form you would use. If you're doing payroll entirely on your own, which is a very, very small group, these tools would at least be your documentation for the adjustments that you're going to make yourself before you send a check or whatever other provider you might be using before you send in the monies. Okay. Next slide, please. So we've sent it to everybody. I mentioned this already, so I'm not going to harp on it, but there's 1,700 plus subsidy payments arriving right now. And the irony with this program is you have all year to claim it. You could have chosen not to sign up with ADP and wait 6 months and do it when the dust settled. But the idea here was to get this was the money, the surest money available to you. And that's why everybody is rushing to ask whether it's in their bank yet. Next slide, please. So I had this example last week, but the main message is that there's a maximum for the more or less 16-week period or so, which it is. There's a maximum subsidy of $1,375. But there's also a cap of 10% of salary that you can take out of this income tax bucket that I was referencing to Julia's question. So basically, If you have one employee, it's going to take 3 monthly transactions to maximize your entitlement there. And that'll be $500 the first two and $375 the next. Next slide. And this is the one that was wrong last week. And I just want to thank Mark Cuddy from Ottawa for catching this as the next slide comes up.
Is that not up? I'm sorry.
Not for me. There we go. Okay.
Sorry.
So here's where we added a couple of, the main message was that even if you have someone on payroll, for 5 hours a week or as long as they're on payroll taking source deductions, you're entitled to a piece of that 10% wage subsidy, and the subsidy can actually be higher for those folks because you're getting more from the higher paid person. However, there's still a cap of 10% of payroll over this period. So I've used 3 months. If it's $7,000 per month of payroll, then it's $700 per month, or $2,100 is the maximum. I got carried away last week, and I want to thank Mark again, Mark Cuddy from Ottawa, Trinity United, for flagging this for me. It also helps, I think, simplify a couple of slides later on. Next slide, please. So the first thing is, what wages to use? Okay, and this is an actual, pay stub type thing, and I'm going to give you two answers. Okay, many of you who are doing it might have used total gross, which in this case is $1,097.04. And this is a case where there's someone who has a manse. So there's a manse, fair market value of manse in there for $500. You can't count the manse. That's not cash. It's not wages, even though it's a very valuable, benefit in terms of overall compensation. So in this case, even though total earnings are $1,600, the manse comes out. Now, the calculation that ADP is using is to add back in this $3.93. Whether you did or not, if you've done it and didn't do that, life will go on. I wouldn't go put any effort into correcting that. These taxable life insurance amounts are puny. And for those of you who are doing payroll outside of ADP, I know for a fact that some of you don't even know about this. So if you were claiming, in this instance, 1097.04, fine. The number that's being used by ADP in their calculation would be 1,197. So taking that moving now to the next slide, just want to show people what the ADP sheet looks like. Okay, so I put in the same people, got income tax, got the $700 coming out, and these are the inputs that if you were doing it yourself, you would then put it on a change form and submit. The value of having ADP do it is they will track the 3-month entitlement, and you could be claiming this for the next 6 months, depending on how big your income tax bucket is. So next slide, please. So again, we claimed, in this case, I just typed this in to have everything match. We claimed for one period, but the summary would track how much was claimed, how much carryover there might be, and there'd be several periods for this. It literally could take 6 or 7 periods, depending on how much income tax you take and specific circumstances. Next slide, please. So conclusions for the 10% part. Certainly, we've been recommending that you have this done for you. It's multiple transactions that you wouldn't otherwise have to do. If you're doing it on yourself on ADP, frankly, you probably were really comfortable with this stuff and did it faster than the big group is getting. You would have already had your payments. If you have employees not on ADP, you need to do that separately, and it's going to depend on whether you have a separate payroll number. It's going to depend on whether you're holding income tax, and there's a whole host of factors there. One of the questions that we are still thinking out loud about is whether you could access extra subsidy or income tax capacity in the ADP bucket for your other employees. And for the moment, we're saying we'll cross that bridge in the next couple of months. Hopefully we'll get some more guidance. In the short run, you should be calculating whatever entitlement you have, and then we'll see where that goes. And of course, this whole thing would be easier if there was a common standard and all your employees were on ADP. I'm going to stress that the 10% calculation of what you get in a pay period is different from what you might claim on the 75% side. So let me explain that in a little more detail as we get into the 75% calculation. Next slide, please. I think we might be coming up on questions soon. Oh, just exception situations. And there's a number of you out there that have stories that you don't even know yourself why you have them. I could call out a number of names from coast to coast, but the normal thing is to have one business number, one, for everything. For if you're a single point charge, this is how you should always be structured. Everything should be the same number with a different suffix. And then some of us will have two payrolls under that same number. That's okay. But multi-point charges will have a different payroll number very commonly. And then there's all kinds of stuff going on around exception situations in terms of what to include or exclude in a calculation. But the main thing is that for these purposes, the government thinks everything's normal, and it's in this first section. And frankly, the United Church has never aimed to be consistent and concise and compliant across the country. So we've always had, some flexibility to try to make things work however we make them work, but it's biting us now. Next slide, please. This might be a question. No, okay. So as I said, the norm is one business number, exceptions, and then we layer on stuff where we've made our own choices, where if we have some people on ADP and some not. What to do will depend on a bunch of other things, like do you consolidate a T4? If you do, then the CRA picture is pretty clean. They've got one T4 summary, and whatever you're doing to hold that together, you can probably file stuff fairly smoothly. If you have, do you file separate T4 summaries and not consolidate? Do you have different RP numbers? All those things will complicate matters. Now, I want to say that the 10% claim, we control it. We're taking that money. We're entitled to it, but we're taking it. For the 75% claim, to the extent that we're applying for it, this RP, any differences in government numbers can mess things up. And finally, I think we're getting to the questions slide. Let's see if we are.
Yep, there you go.
There we go. There we go.
The first question that I've got is about the educational allowance, and is that considered part of gross pay, or is that something else?
Well, part of it, part of that will depend on how it's set up. If it's set up where, first of all, if it's set up as a reimbursement, then it's not even a wage, or it's not even taxable. If it's set up as a taxable benefit, then it is cash, and technically should be included as wages, I think. Clyde, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I would agree with you. If it's an allowance where you're not looking for receipts of any sort, you just pay so much every pay, then it's definitely included. Same thing with travel. In some places, they do the same. Telephone, As long as you're not getting bills and reimbursing, it's included and it's taxable.
Okay,
Thank you.
and I'm just looking at the chat box. How does the 10% come, by direct deposit or by check? It should almost always be like ADP will, if they're processing a payroll, they have a bank account that they're drawing from. They would credit back to that same bank account.
Not seeing a lot of questions yet, so people are still absorbing, I think. But yeah, friends, this is the time. If you've got questions, put them in the chat, and we'll pick them up and address them. I try to keep a list of topics. So as the questions come in, I put them under CRA questions or ADP questions or wage subsidy program, so that I can pitch them to our presenters in a way that makes logical sense to everybody and not just the person who raised it. So here's one. We've got CRA direct deposit in our business account for GST rebates. Does that cover payroll as well? How do you can't seem to find a place to set up the payroll deposit separately?
Clyde? Not sure.
There is a way of setting it up. It depends on how you filled out the direct deposit form for the HST or GST rebates. You could tell it for direct deposit for the RT account, but not including any of the others, and probably didn't think that the RP would ever trigger a rebate to you. But that's one of the concerns, and I have not found a way to easily go in and do that other than to file a new direct deposit form. And fortunately now, most of our major banks and credit unions have it where you can do it online directly out of your bank account. So give it a try.
Okay, thank you. Question about the benefits that congregations, I guess, pay the employer side of some of the benefits. Are those to be included in the wage subsidy, or is it just that total gross that is sort of reported on the T4 that goes to the wage subsidy?
It's the amount that's paid to the employee. It is not anything benefits. It's not the employer's expenses.
Thank you. And what about housing allowance?
Housing allowance today is strictly with the MANTS, and we've already indicated that if it's, Eric indicated that if it's not a cash amount, it's not included. Generally, a MANTS today is not included in that.
Yeah. Whereas
everybody else has the combined, I can't remember what the term is, but everyone else has the combined. We don't separate out salary and housing allowance anymore, do we?
that's right.
That's right.
To the extent that it's included in the comprehensive salary, and again, we need to remember that that's what the government is seeing. They're seeing a payroll bill that they're trying to help everybody with. So some of the unique circumstances of the church wouldn't necessarily be factored in. So the MANTS situation is the one that we're specifically excluding.
So here's a weird one. I'd love to know the story behind this. We've got two RP numbers. Do we apply for both? Do we have to apply for both, or could we apply for just one?
That's an interesting one for the 10%. For the 10%, the idea that you could have a separate cap, I haven't seen it defined anywhere per employer. Whether RP number means a different employer, but let me just say for the 75%, you absolutely have to apply for each RP number. That is absolutely clear in the 75%. In the 10%, you're basically going to need to look to see if you have income tax to draw on the income tax bucket for each of those accounts. I would be tempted to consolidate in that situation.
Makes sense. So
I'm also seeing for the 10,000. Oh, that's something else. Michelle is asking about the loan program. There's no deadline at all right now. In fact, as originally contemplated, we thought that program would really kick in the fall, and that's why those dates are movable and so on. but there's no deadline for the $10,000 church loan program. The deadline for filing for the 75% is October. And the deadline for the 10%, there really isn't one. They're literally letting you take that right to your whole 2020 tax filing if you want.
Thank you. Aaron is going to be a private note saying there are lots of questions coming in, so please don't move away from the Q&A slide yet. The YouTube is going crazy.
Okay.
There is one here that it's about the 10% wage subsidy number. And you're recommending we do our own calculation, but ADP is going to do a calculation. And what if they're different? And do we really have to calculate it ourselves? How do we manage that one?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to that in the 75%. I think it's important for folks to understand how it works, because you aren't going to necessarily get 10% of every wage bill. It depends how much is in your income tax bucket. For the main reason to have a look at it right now is what you're going to do with the 75% application, which is the other side of it. So I'm going to speak to that in a fair bit, actually, in the next section, and maybe we can see if I've answered the question. What I'm going to tell people is you need to at least for your 75%, you need to figure out how much of a 10% claim there is in there, because you could take months and months to get that money. And I know that sounds kind of convoluted, but the easiest way to do it actually is for your first Q's claim, the 75%, is just to use 10% of that number as a reduction, as long as you're comfortable that you can get all that back.
Okay. So do either of these wage subsidies have to be paid back, says Denise? It's just free money to us?
Well, certainly the 10% is a complete entitlement. The only audit that I could see of that would be if somehow or other you were found to be claiming more than you could or should have for some reason. But it is absolutely an entitlement. The 75% is based on meeting those income thresholds, the decline in income. So there is a qualification there, and so there is, that's going to be audited. We certainly wouldn't want to see that abused, and there's no question that that'll be checked. And if folks have been really abusive with it, there's even penalties that have been described. And I think we've all heard the Prime Minister, offer cautionary language around that. But the 10% doesn't need to be repaid, period, because you're all going to be qualifying entities. And the 75%, as long as you've been reasonable and documented your findings and stuff, the absolute worst case would be an audit where someone disagreed to your entitlement. But that's why I say document like crazy. And this is not going to be one of those things where tax inspectors get sent out to raise cash. If anything, they want to just catch the most egregious offenders. And you may have heard, even today it was being debated. Today and yesterday there was huge debate around pumping out the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit without much policing mechanisms. They're going to police it later. And I would say the same thing applies here.
Thank you.
If I can just add into that for a minute, I know that if your numbers, your pre-March 15th salary, average weekly salary is low, and then you're claiming in the 4-week period a much higher number. I've already known of 4 cases where they've actually placed a call to find out why the numbers are so much higher. So they are doing some minor reviewing of it as it goes.
Great, thank you. So let me say to Jeff in the Zoom room, I'm not quite sure I understand your question because it's kind of brief. Could you expand that a little bit, please? And in the meantime, let me ask another one. Here's a CRA question, maybe to you, Clyde. I'm told by the CRA that although I'm on the T3010, I'm not listed on other records, so I can't register. But they won't even tell me who is on those records, so I can't go and figure out how to connect. What do you do?
the information that is on the CRA payroll side of things is totally different than the information that's in the charities directorate, and the two of them do not combine. Because the information in the payroll side is confidential, they will not tell you who's there or who's not there. So what we've suggested is when you apply to represent a client, and that's the easiest way rather than going through the My Business account in a situation like this, is when you send the form back that's giving you authorization and it's signed by somebody at your church who's got the authority, then include with it a letter with other names on it to say that these should also be on the list for authorization. And that has, up till now, tended to work fairly easy. And one of the quick ways of getting that list together is to send a copy of your T1235, your list of officers and directors that were filed with your T3010 last year.
And Clyde, this is probably from someone you know at Birchcliff Bluffs, so there might be an opportunity to follow up offline. So if you wanted to send us an email about that, we might be able to dive into that one a bit further.
Great.
Yeah,
Other questions on YouTube?
Get Kathy to send the email directly to me, and I bet I could give her an answer quickly.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. It's always nice to have an in, right? So last question on my screen before we go on, unless Aaron comes up with 10 more while you're talking. What about an employee who's under the restorative care program or short-term disability? What do we do in that case?
Yeah, we've been having some interesting discussions about that. And basically what can happen is you're recovering, what's the number? 85%, I think, of, is it restorative care? I'm just pulling that. I think that's the number. It's higher than the 75. Okay. So theoretically, you could get the restorative care payment for an individual and the 75%, and that seems to be inappropriate. So on the other hand, you want to claim the maximum benefit you're entitled to in the period. So you might need to do some special math there. But what I would say is you look to adjust your calculation for the amount that where restorative care, or for the time period that restorative care is paying you, because you're frankly getting paid more. And it does seem unethical is too strong a word, but just seems inappropriate to be making money out of an illness. So that's our thought there, that and again, we've just been debating this literally today. Alan Hall and I were discussing this just an hour and a half ago, and that's our view. And we might put together a little procedural piece on that to help you along. So that should be a relatively rare case, but send it along, and we'll have a hard look at it to make sure that you're feeling comfortable with the calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I have one more question here. It was private to me, which is why you're not seeing it. And Jeff expanded on what he was saying. So he responded to my request. He's under the understanding that the 10% wage program runs to the first to the end of the month, but the 75% program runs like from the 15th to the 14th. Are there two different time periods for these two different programs, or how does that work?
There are slightly different dates, and I'm just pulling them from my head right now, but I think it's is it the 18th to the 6th or something like that for payrolls. So it's when your payroll runs that you take the 10% calculations. And yes, these things don't integrate easily. But it's literally when you're however number of payrolls that you have run, and that will depend on whether you're on monthly or semi-monthly and whatever, during the 10% period. Those are the payrolls that you're entitled to the 10% rebate on, however many there are. And then the 75% program runs on these 4-week increments, and the dates don't quite match, but you don't have to worry about that. We can overthink this.
Yeah, no, that helps. And thank you. The last question I've got again was a private one to me, and was, could Clyde share his email? You know what? I'm just a little nervous about putting lots and lots of different emails out there.
tell you what.
What I'm recommending is that you do one of two things. Either you send questions like this to info@united-church.ca, or you send them to me, and it'll come back to the, from the reminders you've got for these webinars or some of the information and stuff. And I can forward them on to Clyde or to Eric or something or other, and we'll try not to fill up their inbox with all of these questions, because they have day jobs as well. But I've received a lot of these questions. I know Eric has got some personally. I've certainly forwarded stuff on to Clyde. We don't want to stand in the way, but we also want to protect people who have day jobs. So there's two things you can do. Send it to me or send it to info, and we'll make sure it gets to the right place.
Okay, folks, thank you for that. We'll move into the 75% now. So again, you've seen this. There's the government's webpage keeps getting updated. So it is it still is being changed. And frankly, things are changing so fast that if something's deemed to be an improvement, but not up to the Prime Minister's announcement level, you literally, like I'm using accounting, I'm not using them, I'm borrowing their stuff, but I'm literally checking with law firms and accounting firms each day who give me a recap of what changed today. So these are the steps. We'll go through them, through some of them relatively quickly. Let's go. Next slide, please. So the application to the CRA is for each 4-week period, starting in, I think this one starts on the 15th, doesn't it?
I think that's right.
Yeah, in any case, they tell you the exact dates, and they're, the first thing we have to do is use the spreadsheet, because now this is the government spreadsheet on the government website, and whatever someone's salary is, it'll figure out the entitlements based on the cap and so on. And we just want to stress that there are a lot of companies, private sector companies and so on, that are using this approach to basically pay their entire compensation bill. We are using it to offset revenue loss more directly. So we think you have to be careful if you're reducing salaries and claiming this benefit, because you might bump into provincial employment standard problems. But by the same token, if someone isn't working at all and that's part of their deal, then there's an additional element that you can claim, which is the CPP and EI employer portion. So next slide, please. And these are fairly obvious on the worksheet. So just talking about revenue, because this is the thing, you have to be eligible, you have to document, you have to be able to show your numbers year over year and so on. And these are the revenue principles that we've identified. And I want to stress that I will not give prescriptive advice here on exactly what to do, where there just needs to be room for you to use your judgment, because a lot of this isn't defined anywhere. It's not in the Income Tax Act. What is extraordinary income isn't a defined term in the Income Tax Act. And chunks of monies that church receive, are extraordinary. So we have adopted these principles, though. We've said that revenue should be recognized once through the layers of the church. And we've suggested that certain monies like mission and service or outreach monies that are pure flow through should be recognized at the recipient level as opposed to at the local church. We've said that even though bequests are relatively infrequent, they are a normal revenue stream for a church. A church can reasonably expect to get bequests occasionally. I could also try to argue that that's extraordinary in most congregations. One of the tests that they use in the CRA calls is if something doesn't happen, I've seen the number said every 3 or 4 years, or it doesn't happen with that kind of frequency. So we're offering that bequests should be considered. The the government rules themselves allow you to include or exclude government income, which would be some of the grants, the accessibility grants and other grants that many congregations receive. We've also talked about whether mission support grants, paid now to congregations, are potentially excluded. And we've suggested they could be excluded because they are arguably non-arm's length transactions. Whereas a grant to an outreach agency, an outreach, if you pick the Wesley in Hamilton, or Stella Bury in Newfoundland, or First United in Vancouver, those have separate boards, and those, the mission support grants there would be revenue that they should be counting. Again, we're excluding non-cash investment gains and losses. Okay, so if you've got a portfolio that's bouncing up and down like a yo-yo, and by the way, if you have a portfolio, it is bouncing up and down like a yo-yo. we don't count that. Next slide, please. So what is extraordinary? For sure, a sale proceeds from a sale of assets, and I'm talking about a building or land, can't count. We think there's a pretty compelling argument that a focused, restricted capital campaign could be excluded. It's extraordinary, it's restricted use, the money is not available to operations. And that would be true for capital assistance grants from the National Church or Faithful Footprints grants, where we're making grants to help reduce your carbon footprint. The UCW is, I'm going to say, a gray area for this. None of our systems, I don't know of a single church that has integrated its accounting to where the UCW revenues are counted on, literally as they come in. There's usually some after the fact consolidation. So do you count UCW revenue? The guidelines I'm offering are, if you consolidate them on your T3010, you probably should try to at least explain what you're doing with the revenues when you're doing your comparison year over year. If the UCW avails itself of the charity's tax receipting, I don't think there's much to discuss. Then I think it's by any CRA compliance measure, it's part of the charity. So that one, again, document what you're doing. That's the key message there. Excuse me.
There's a comment here in the Zoom chat that this might be to your advantage, because lots of UCWs have canceled fundraising programs this spring because of the virus. So your income, that will push your income for this spring down over in comparison to last spring. If they have a book sale or a flower sale or a garage sale or a rummage sale or something this spring.
Yeah, I'm not talking about advantage, pro or con, but I'm trying to remain neutral on that. The biggest challenge with UCW monies is when the timing of their disbursement, or a transfer of monies to the church.
Mm-hmm.
If they're part of the church books, technically the money is revenue when it actually came in, not when it was transferred
from the UCW account to the church's account. Right.
And so just suffice it to say, whatever you do with that, have your numbers available and document your rationale. Through all of this, I'm very confident that as long as we demonstrate good faith in recording what we've done and our rationale for same, I think there's going to be latitude offered on interpretation. Okay, next slide. So eligibility, I think folks are up on this, but I've gotten enough questions that I'm going to just stress again that the test in March is a 15% drop in revenue. Defined the way we just defined it. Okay, the counting revenues a certain way, and you've got two ways to look at it: comparing it to prior year or the average of the current year. If you pass the test in March, you automatically qualify in April. You don't have to retest. So you could have a situation where your revenues didn't go down in April, whatever happened to your revenues in April, you're still entitled to it, but you have to then retest in May. And this whole cycle now is going to be expanded because the Prime Minister has announced that there's going to be some degree, however long, of extension to this program. So for our purposes, let's assume that it's going to be at least 4 weeks because this thing's organized around 4-week cycles. And that would be then based on June revenues. And it might be longer, it might be 8 weeks or 12 weeks. Stay tuned. So it's important to be tracking this stuff, even if you failed the test the first time. And by failed, I mean didn't qualify for the rebate. And I don't think this affects us much, but there are these technical rules, and there's a few more rules in the package around if you have someone on payroll who hasn't been paid for more than 14 days, then you have to factor that in a different way. Okay, next slide, please.
Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
So I've gone through this a few times, but this is really just for the multi-point charges. The whole thing is based on where payroll resides. And Clyde talked a little bit earlier about, even accessing different numbers. The charity side doesn't talk to the payroll side. So you need to have your approvals and your names and authorizations in both places. Our church system doesn't make sense to the outside world when it comes to multi-point charges. So what I'm saying to multi-point charges is you probably have to consolidate. You're going to be filing based on a payroll number. Next slide, please. If your charitable status is at the pastoral charge level, then you're fine. That your payroll is at that level, and theoretically, at least, your payroll number is the same as your charity number and all that stuff. So this would be the same as for any single point charge. It should be straightforward, and then we layer on our usual exceptions. But normally, a multi-point charge where the charitable status is at the charge will work really smoothly for this program, unless you have something really quirky with your numbers. Next slide. From a CRA perspective, where the underlying points have charitable status, this is quirky. This doesn't quite fit. And therefore, what I'm saying, and I've been saying this for a few weeks now, so I'm not going to harp on it, we do need to consolidate our financials in that situation. So those are the two main points for the multi-charge people. Next slide, please. Oh, it must be about 10 after 8.
Gee, it's not appearing
After 8.
Okay, folks. Okay, moving right along. Thank you. So want to stress that the 75% program, this is what we have to apply for. An individual application has to be applied for at the RP level. So if you have RP 0001 and 0002, a number of people have applied for that basis and gotten their money. So that seems to be working just fine. And you would do a separate version of the CRA online spreadsheet and the application for each RP number. Where you've got some folks, I keep coming to exceptions, we're on ADP and some not, you're going to have separate work papers, and it depends how you've structured your RP numbers. So all I'm going to say there is use the spreadsheets, use the spreadsheet online, but it's going to be based on whatever your RP or payroll number, as that is called, however those are structured. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the calculator. So again, we're running with the same wage calculation as we are for the 10%. So what we said before applies. It's sort of gross wages, and then we've got that frankly silly little adjustment for the insurance amount. The key point here being that there's also the baseline consideration that Clyde mentioned earlier. You do have to put in what your your weekly remuneration was between January and March. Just, they're basically testing to make sure you're not playing some kind of games there. You calculate your subsidy. The first claim period is March 15th to April 11th. And so that claim period, I know folks have filed for and gotten their money. Typically, if you have online banking, if you have the bank account registered, it's literally turned around in less than 3 days every time from the government. Every situation I've seen. What could slow it down is if they do pull your file to ask the kind of questions that Clyde referenced earlier. Okay, next slide. So again, there's 3 different calculations. The spreadsheet does this for you. You just need to know. One is if somebody's making more than the full subsidy amount, if they're making less, and if there's been a reduction in pay. So there's provision on the spreadsheet to group each of those, and the spreadsheet will help you with that. And when I say the spreadsheet, this is the spreadsheet that you download from the government webpage. Next slide, please. So here's the same earnings little report that we saw earlier. Okay, again, you've got the business around the amounts not being counted, and you've got the business around the life insurance amount, which, as I say, ADP has been adding back in. So in this case, it would be converting this to weekly, and then for each of your salary folks, filling in the spreadsheet as follows. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just stressing here, this is the wording, and then we'll show it to you, but the spreadsheet itself, it has provision for each week of the claim periods. Clyde has been working with this sheet, and he's saying that given the number of employees most of you, in fact, all of you have, it makes way more sense to write in each of the names and amounts individually, so you have a complete record of what you were doing. You are going to typically, my mindset is monthly salaries, in which case you need to convert it to weekly by multiplying by 12 and 52. If you're on semi-monthly, for example, then you would multiply by 24, et cetera, et cetera. It's weekly, and as Clyde has noted here from an earlier presentation, you need to have an entry even if it's 0. Next slide, please. So those of you who haven't gone there, this is a bit of what it looks like. I should have put employee number 1, employee number 2, and so on, but I guess I forgot to change that. In any case, you can see that the system, you put in the gross pay, and then the system calculates the 3/4 entitlement for each individual. And this is all information that you're going to need to have on hand. Next slide. That I think we're going. Oh, okay. Actually, there's one more slide. That calculate the values. So you do that, what we just did. Then there's a couple of other elements. If you have people 100% not working but paid, there is a field for you to put in the amount of employer, EI, and CPP. And this is if somebody's been furloughed, and basically there's an express legal or statement that they aren't working at all. This, you have to be careful here because there's all kinds of people doing partial work. If they're getting paid, if they're getting paid and still doing some work, theoretically you're not eligible for this. At the General Counsel office, we're not eligible for this at all because we are asking folks to work remotely. And in a congregation setting, if you have someone checking, going in even periodically to pick up payments or check the mail or what, or even the building, that's not quite the same as furloughed. So you want to be careful with that. But again, document your assumptions. Next slide, please. So this is the basic summary of the calculator. And in this case, it calculated a 75% wage. I'm suggesting for the purpose of this first round claim that you take 10% of gross wages. You're eventually going to recover $480. You have to test that against the two limits, the 10% of salaries limit. But if you're ultimately going to get $480 back, you should claim it now, because you don't know. You have like months and months for this to come back to you in dribs and drabs, but you might not be eligible next month. So I think this is the most honest and direct and forthright way to handle the subsidy. I don't think you need to be waiting for the first calculation or the second calculation by ADP if they're doing it for you, because if there are carryover amounts, it's going to take a few months before you get the entire benefit. And for this 4-week period, 10% makes sense. Next slide. So the 10%, the whole system assumes that everyone applied for the 10%. So they're subtracting it out. And there's also provision if we have employees who are receiving work share benefits and those kinds of things. To my knowledge, we don't have that. I haven't seen any questions on that. But basically, you make all of these adjustments and you calculate it. There's a summary page for the calculator. Print it out. It's part of your documentation, and then you're ready to apply. Okay, next slide, please. And again, before you apply, if you have direct deposit set up, great. If you don't, it'll be snail mail, but you want to make sure that you've got everything that you need. And there's only 5 or 6 numbers. It's 5 or 6 numbers plus the name of the person who's submitting it, and then plus the name of the senior official. So the senior official for most of you should be the treasurer, in my opinion, but it might be I've seen some folks put the board chair or clerk of session, and I've seen some people put the M&P chair, but basically it's one of your lead board members, I think is the best way to describe that. It could be a trustee as well in our language. Next slide. Again, we're recapping the 3 ways to do it. If you've got My Business Account, great. Clyde's got some information if you're caught in a catch-22 there, which can happen if a business account got set up and now they can't tell you who it is. And of course, you need to have separate access or authorization on both the payroll side and the charities directorate side. So the most straightforward way, if you're still struggling with that, is to try the business representative route. And if that doesn't work, just go with the online code. I mean, I've been filing the online code for my own church for HST for ages, and frankly never bothered to set up a My Account. Thankfully got a bookkeeper who could do those kinds of things. So next slide. We've talked a little bit about the attestation form. Basically, keep all your records. The attestation isn't a huge problem. It's slightly different depending on which avenue you go into. If you're a representative, it's not quite the same as if you're the lead contact and so on. But again, it should be printed and signed as part of your record keeping. You don't submit it. All the folks I've talked to have gotten their money. I mean, it's pretty amazing. You literally send something in on Thursday afternoon, and Monday it's in your bank. That's how fast the government is pumping out money right now to try to, I guess, preserve the economy as best it can. The whole business around overpayments and so on is something that will get figured out later, and we should be thinking about doing some reconciliation in hopefully the summer or fall when these programs have wound up. But right now we're trying to get cash for you to pay the bills, to pay salaries. And I just assume that there's going to be some reconciliation to make sure it all hangs together. Next slide. Again, a bit more about the attestation. I'm including it here. I'm not going to speak to every box, but Clyde's gone through this at previous presentations. There's key boxes that probably apply to multi-points and so on, but there's a whole bunch of them that don't. And you can use this as a quick reference guide. Next slide, please. So after you've applied, if it's online, you're getting payment within 3 days. I actually think even if they're sending paper checks, which is for those folks where they don't have the bank information, I think they're going to be pumping those into the mail pretty fast. It's just that it's really hard to say. It's going to go to the named payroll contact they have on file and whatever address. And I just don't have a point of view yet on just how fast that might be. But it's certainly going to be slower than the 3 days. When we ultimately go to report all this stuff, this is going to be government grants. There's this whole plan to include this information on every single person's T4. Nobody has a clue how that's going to work yet. And all the government stuff says we'll figure that out in maybe October or November when we're all allowed to congregate again, hopefully. But the key point through all of this is just write stuff down. And if you're a treasurer, you've heard me say this lots of times, don't wear it yourself, okay? Document all your assumptions, share your records and calculations and so on with your board. And again, if you're doing this in good faith, I really think there's not going to be any problem. Everyone in the whole system is rushing like crazy and doing the best they can. Next slide. Okay.
So I've got a few questions. I've just been waiting for you.
Fire away.
So I've the first set of questions really is about the wage subsidy program that you've been talking about. I've got other questions about the ADP thing. So let's start with the wage subsidy thing. We were talking about if you qualify for March, then you don't have to do the test for April, but then you have to qualify for May. If it gets extended to June, if you qualified for May, are you going to get a pass for June?
Your guess is as good as mine. If they follow the current pattern, I would say yes. The whole idea, it will depend a little bit on what they're finding and so on. Best guess is that they would extend the pattern for however long the program goes. In other words, if you that you would not have to retest every month. But that's just a guess. Anything beyond what is written down in the income, and passed by Parliament is conjecture.
Thank you. Another congregation has a minister on maternity leave right now, but she's expected to come back to work in July. So clearly they can't apply now since she's on maternity leave. But when she comes back, would they apply then if the program's still running?
Yes, it would still be like everything is based on your payroll. So whatever your payroll is now, like I'm assuming maybe if the minister's on maternity leave, I don't know what other payroll they might have. But an addition in July is going to get caught up in whatever the eligibility rules are, in the same way that right now the CRA asks for January to mid-March, and they're saying, well, what was your payroll? So it's hard to say whether that would end up being a position that is subsidized. It will depend on what the rules are and how far it's extended.
Yeah.
So first test is, does the program exist in July? The next test is there some kind of modified eligibility around, what salaries were in the prior months? That's the best I can do.
That's fair. Questions about the ADP. So back up to the 10% program, ADP processing it. Again, what's the last day that a church can ask for help from ADP? There's a deadline for that.
Yeah, it's literally this week because we literally have to set this up sort of for batch processing. This whole deal is completely outside their business model. So we're asking people to sign up. May 15th is the date. You know, we still want people to authorize the general counsel team afterwards. But in terms of setting up these batches and doing all the extra work that has to around ADP's workflows, it's basically Friday, and you might get away with the weekend, but that's it.
Basically, you're telling us speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, and over half of folks have, but we've certainly heard from a number of people who didn't know about this, and that's why we arranged to open, have this opportunity. But it is time limited.
There was somebody on YouTube who was trying to figure out whether or not they were on the ADP list already, and there had been a list posted and then it was taken down for privacy concerns. If you're not sure whether you're on the list, the word I have here is write to info@united-church.ca and they will double check it. If the list isn't posted, it got taken down because there was personal information in it that shouldn't have been on a public web page.
Who's saying that?
Let you know if you're on the list.
I'm actually going to, what you just said is news to me.
Okay.
I'm just going to.
It is posted now on the list. There we go.
I'm going to just look right now to see if it's there, but we've actually tried to post information that isn't confidential on the website, and it's basically, it's sorted in postal code order, and it has the name of the church and the postal code.
Okay.
And that's how you look yourself up.
I think there have been sort of conflicting information even from my colleague on the other on the YouTube chat. So people are in Zoom here are posting the list. Aaron is telling me that the list is posted. So I guess that set of questions was overtaken by events. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's still there. I just looked it up myself. So next question, please.
Yeah, so when you're consolidating 3 churches in a multi-point charge, I'm not sure I understand this question myself, but I'll read it to you. Do you treat them as equal even though they do pay different proportions of the salaries?
Again, what I would suggest makes the most sense to me is you're claiming, and there's different permutations of this. One is if one of the points, for whatever reason, is using their RP, their payroll number, and basically performing a service for the other entities. In any of those situations, it needs to be a local decision. My take would be that if you're distributing the cost in a certain proportion, to me at least, it makes sense to distribute the rebate or the subsidy in the same proportion. But there might, I don't know why there would be reasons not to do it that way, but there might be local reasons, but that should be the starting point, in my opinion.
Okay. And I think Laura Wilkes's question here in Zoom is very similar to the one that I just read you, so that makes sense.
Yes.
Way back at the beginning, and I'm not, you may have answered it already, but the church loan for $10,000, is there a deadline for applying for that?
There is no deadline, and as I tried to say before, the dates are kind of fluid too. We've got some dates where it's interest-free till whatever it is. I think October 2021 or something. All of those things are fluid. Those are min specs, and by that I mean it'll be interest-free at least that long. Might end up being longer depending on how things go. And we also have to factor in when people apply, but there is no deadline at this point. And in fact, we're hoping that people can avail themselves of these other programs first, because frankly, we will have some limited capacity. Right now, we're in good shape, but I'm going to be borrowing money to top up that fund.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing a lot of extra new questions coming in, friends. So if you have more questions, now's the time. And by all means, add them to the chat and we'll pick them up.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a comment. The list is online but hidden. I'm not. It's one of the attachments. If you go onto payroll at the United Church, and it looks like, it's basically on the main payroll page with all the other with the ADP forms for people with prior communication. we're rushing to get this stuff out. So, we're certainly not intending it for it to be hidden, but they are attachments at the bottom of the payroll service page at the national website.
Great, thanks. And if you're not finding exactly what you need, friends, I mean, you certainly are welcome to write an email to info or to me, and we'll try to make sure it gets to the right spot. We're all working overtime trying to make sure that you get what you need. So.
Yeah. Okay, well, while we're waiting on some questions, I'll just mention, or actually we could even just do a couple more slides and then take more questions if need be. Let's move on to the next slide. These are really summary type slides again. So again, you don't need any region or national or any kind of approval. The wage subsidy stuff is a local business matter. But I do encourage treasurers to not wear any of this themselves. If you're applying, or if you have a rationale for substantiating your eligibility, if it's remotely close, or if there are key assumptions in it, my advice is do not wear it yourself. That's my advice to treasurers on all kinds, anytime there's a difficult issue. A loan application, should be approved by the congregation board, and that form goes directly to the region. The region gives it a very quick review, in my experience, every region that we've dealt with, and forwards that on to Maria Pimpinella in the General Counsel office. We don't ask for signatures. We're not asking for any of that stuff. What we would like to have is the bank information so that we can send that money to you electronically. And if we have that, then basically it happens the same week. Next slide. So this is a key message. There's some really detail-oriented people out there that are trying to reconcile the fact that there's a 3-day mismatch between the two programs, and one is based on weeks and one is based on actual payrolls run during the interval and stuff. I worried about this for the first few weeks, and then I just decided life is too short. The government is doing its very best to rush out some programs in a way that meet all kinds of different stakeholders. All this is happening at once. Undoubtedly there will be an extra amount somewhere or other on the 10% calculations, whoever's doing them. Undoubtedly there might be some errors made. I know of one person, for example, who didn't understand the employer-employee, the employer EI and CPP thing. They just claimed it and realized after reading it later that they shouldn't have. And we didn't have a nice, easy answer for how to fix that. We're going to fix all this stuff. We'll figure out ways to do it. But right now, keep the best records you can, your rationale, and just keep moving. Next slide. So, in summary, process the 10% transactions, but recognize that they might take some weeks or months. Now that we're set up, we won't have the delays you just had, but it could still take several payroll cycles to maximize to max out your entitlement of the 10%, and it is an entitlement. On the 75%, spend the most of your energy on the eligibility. If you're eligible, then the rest is just figuring out how to apply online and how to work the calculator and stuff. But most of that is easy if you've satisfied yourself you're eligible, and just keep records, keep records.
Every month. You have to apply every month for that program.
That's correct. Yeah. So for example, if you met the test in March, you automatically qualify in April, but you still have to tell the government what your numbers are. So you apply each month and keep moving. Next slide. Promise, folks, we're in the home stretch. So I've added a couple of extra sort of contact things here for the temporary wage subsidy program. Payroll at United Church, Eileen, Ravi, Olga, and Angelica's whole team are doing a great job there. they're also swamped. So they'll get back to you as fast as they can. But I do believe that we're now past this bubble where everybody's saying, "Where's my money? Where's my money?" It isn't just in the mail; it's in the ether. So I'm hoping that when you go check, say end of day tomorrow, you should be in good shape. The emergency loan program is an online application. I think most regions will have this link up on their region websites, but it's available nationally too. And the link will go to the appropriate region. Wherever you are, it will go to your region, or either that or you indicate your region, one of those. Okay, that's really it. I'm just going to check some more for questions, but I hope this has been helpful. Next time, we're not going to just keep going over this stuff. We think we're thinking of offering sort of an open, more just totally fielding questions from people and trying to have a whole bunch of folks in background keeping track. We also anticipate starting a webinar series at some point about reentry, particularly if you're in a province where you might be needing to open the church for tenants like schools or daycares, and you're not going to be open for worship for a while, that kind of stuff. But next week, we're thinking a question and answer. We might also allocate some time to the whole church statistics side of things through all of this too, just so folks are comfortable. Susan Jackson again is hoping that those of you who haven't gotten around to the statistics will get those in. We really haven't harped on that this year, given everything else that's going on. So, Stephen, any other questions there, or would you like to wrap us up?
Again, about the wage subsidy program. So again, we've got 3 churches on one payroll, but they're not all, they're not sort of all 33%.
Yeah, again,
they average evenly? Do they average according to the percentage they pay in? How would they work that one?
well, the first test is, can they consolidate their financials? So if they're just sharing, it's the RP number that applies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're a pastoral charge, there's an argument for consolidating their financials. If there are 3 churches just piggybacking on each other, I think it's a more tenuous argument to consolidate their 3 financials. I think at that point, you're literally rolling the dice on what the picture looks like for the church that has the payroll. If that church qualifies on its own revenues, then it can claim the full payroll back. If it doesn't, I think it's a really tenuous argument to start aggregating the financials from groups that the United Church doesn't think are related, even though you've got this administrative construct.
Okay.
Now, that's someone that might want to, send along more detail, and maybe we can find a really good rationale for it. But the main thing is multi-points pastoral charges. It's perfect. It's very defensible. It's a United Church structure. It's, hey, why wouldn't we aggregate those financials? If it's a bunch of churches that of their own volition have decided to redistribute normal admin tasks or something, it's just a little trickier. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying have your eyes open.
Thank you. So Peter Mitchell is confused about the employees who are furloughed. Now, it seems to me that wasn't about whether you qualify for the wage subsidy. It was just about whether or not you could claim the employer portions of CBP or something.
That's right. And that's an interesting nuance, because at least the folks I'm working with are working every bit as much, just differently, right? But if someone has been is being paid, and there is no expectation of duties, then I think you could say, even after the fact that they've been furloughed, you might want to document it.
I have a person in my congregation who works for a daycare agency and has been furloughed.
Yeah.
She's being paid, and they're going to do the wage subsidy thing, but she's not going into work. So that's a really clear-cut case.
That's a nice clear-cut case. And in that case, Yeah, in that case, Stephen, they claim the 75% plus the employer portion, which is another 6%.
Right.
But I guess what I would say here is, certainly at the national level, we never thought of that. I mean, we have, there might be some jobs that have less to do now than before, but we never thought of furlough as a way of gaining a financial benefit. So we would never dream of doing that now because it's after the fact. But if you have people who clearly have not been asked to do anything, you should document that you're treating them as furloughed, and then claim for the 4-week periods the CPP and EI, the employer portion, which is part of the federal calculation.
I'm just grateful we didn't furlough you, Eric. That's
I could use a furlough.
grateful to have you still working. Okay, couple of questions here. Back to the $40,000 loan program that we're no longer eligible for. People got it, they don't know how to pay it back, what they should do with it, all of those kinds of questions.
Okay, so in a nutshell, I'm aware of at least one congregation that's been able to give it back. Basically, they've gone and requested to pay it off, and that has worked. My advice continues to be sit on it for another few weeks to see what happens. The worst case, it's interest-free. The worst case is that all these favorable signals that we're getting turn out to be just not to pan out, and we're not eligible for the program. That's the worst case. And a couple of weeks later, a couple of weeks from now, maybe we'll have a clearer answer. I know of one congregation that's been able to pay it off by saying, close the account, we want to pay this off, and they wiped out their loan. My fear is if the government does reverse course and you've wiped out your loan, then you're somewhere in a computer record and can't reapply.
Have you already received it?
Yeah, just a catch-22 type stuff. So my advice remains, sit on it for a few more weeks but don't spend it either.
Yeah. Here's a great question from Liz. If you want to do an Ask Us Anything event next week, maybe we should send you our questions ahead of time.
That would be very much appreciated. And I'm just going to make something up on the fly. If you could send them to the email address on this slide, and maybe we could put it in the chat box, Maria Pimpinella, M. Pimpinella. Somebody's got an arrow there on it. If you could send them to that email address, obviously if you send them to me, I'll deal with them too, but I'm just a little bit afraid of getting drowned by email.
Yeah, so send them to Maria or send them to me.
You keep volunteering, Steve, be careful.
Well, I can forward them just as easily as anybody else, but yeah, I think they should all go to one person, and then you can get them when you're ready to digest them. And what that means, folks, is don't assume that Eric's going to answer every email that comes in between now and next Wednesday. We're going to give him a leave to kind of breathe a bit, because I think your inbox has been pretty full.
Yeah.
Go, Maria.
Okay, folks. So, well, no. My instruction to Maria is put them all in one folder and don't even look at them.
Yeah.
And she's online with us tonight too.
Oh, there you go, Maria. Thank you.
You owe her a beer. Eric, once again, what a remarkable evening we've had. There's your picture. You promised us a new one for this.
I did, but next week.
You're slipping. It's been a great evening, and thank you. It never ceases to amaze me how you stay on top of all of this stuff and manage to convey it in a way that is apprehendable to a layperson like me. I am not a finance guy, but I understand what you're saying, and this frightens me sometimes, but it's really exciting. Thank you.
No, thank you, and thank you, Clyde and Aaron. And Clyde's my guru, actually, and Aaron and Kate in the background, and Steve, your calm leadership always. So hopefully we're through the most uncertain period of this, both in terms of the pandemic itself, but even just in terms of how we're trying to cope as church finance leaders. So thank you, everybody.
It's kind of exciting to me that there's not a lot new to say. That means that the shifting and pivoting that we've all been frantically doing for 8 weeks is slowing down, and that's a bit of a relief, frankly. So
I hope you're right. Anyway, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. And are we going to do a little debrief?
Yeah, we will. Let me just kind of sign off here first. I wanted to, hang on, I'm going to try to do 2 things at once. I wanted to say just a word about tomorrow, because, you know, partner to these Wednesday night series, we're doing a Thursday afternoon program for ministers and program leaders and those folks. And so wanted to let you know that tomorrow we have invited some folks from our philanthropy unit back, way back, you know, a million years ago, but really only 8 weeks ago when we started these 2 partner programs. The first folks we brought in were the philanthropy folks. And we asked them 8 weeks ago, help us figure out how do we talk about money to our congregations as the ship springs a leak. And it's 8 weeks later now. And a lot of us have been trying different things, and there's some new practices evolving, and there's some successes happening. And we need to take stock of where we are around stewardship and generosity, and talking about that in online worship, and as ministry leaders, encouraging our congregations to act out of fear and out of trust in the gospel and the good news, instead of, not out of fear, but out of trust in the gospel. So that's the topic for tomorrow's program, and I hope if you can, you'll join us for that too. It's always interesting to get colleagues together from across the country and talk about how do we give leadership in these uncertain times. Thank you, friends. It's time to go. We've actually talked a little longer than we often do, and I want to thank you for your attention and for the ministry that you offer as financial leaders. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next program. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.